Democracy and Diversity Institute,
Yeah.
which has been going on at the New School for 25 plus years. It has been centered all these years on the problems of democracy in contemporary society.
Right.
When I first taught the course, when I first taught in the program, I taught the course on democracy, democratic culture, and the like. In recent years, I've had to add media. So now the course I taught last year, I think, was called Media and Democracy and the New Authoritarianism, or something like that. So I'm really, I regret the fact that I can't continue doing this, but I'm actually very excited that I'm passing it on to you, my colleague, my public seminar colleague in ARMS, and I'm very excited that you're going to be teaching the course on democracy and social media, which I think is absolutely crucial. And I can't imagine having the program without such a course.
I'm very excited about it too,
Yeah.
Jeff, and I kind of feel like we're going to be in dialogue with each other from afar, like we're usually in dialogue with each other just on the hall. I think one of the things that is so interesting about democracy and social media today is that it's a paradox. I think all of the possibilities for social media being a democratic space are still there. But recent history suggests that social media has also been complicit in foreclosing democracy.
Right.
Not just in the United States, but in Eastern Europe, and obviously the activities of the Russian government are very prominent in this, but not only the Russian government. So I think it's going to be very exciting to have a group of students to explore a set of questions that are very live with. And
So what do you think the central questions are now? I mean, I can see sort of the two sides of the coin. You know, that on the one hand, the way new media are complicit, or if not the cause, but a significant factor in the rise of the authoritarianism we are facing globally. And also, it seems to me, necessarily that they will be crucial in resisting those developments.
Well, I think one of the central themes has to be the corporate cultures of these social media companies themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that's been very useful about the current crisis is that users of social media have become hyper aware that what we see on our computer screens is really scripted somewhere else, either by an algorithm or by changing the algorithm. A second thing that I think is very interesting is that these Russian hackers were sort of sociologists. They came into our social media environment and figured out how Americans use social media, and then gave us content that fit the way we use it. So that I think some of the initial promise of social media, that it was just a space for all of us, that it was the most horizontal thing one could be involved with, that has become clear that that's not true, but it hasn't necessarily been replaced by a vertical power structure either. So we're looking at a phenomenon that we have all sorts of pieces of the puzzle, but we don't quite understand it yet.
So you know, we work together as collaborators and colleagues on public seminar.
Yeah.
And we've been talking to some kind of media programming experts, and they tell that at one point we had a meeting where they suggested that they would hack for democracy,
right.
the way the Russians have been hacking to undermine democracy in many different places. Do you think that is that going to be part of your inquiry?
Well, I think it definitely has to be part of the inquiry. I think the other thing that has to be part of the inquiry are the ways in which the most democratic uses of social media have linked real space to virtual space. So if you look at communities, sort of temporary political communities that have been set up as social media regimes, you look at Occupy Wall Street, Tahrir Square, Taksim Square, you know, there have been all of these sort of moments in which people have used social media to bring the world into their space and infuse the rest of the world with the ethic that they're developing in that space. And to me, that is a kind of hacking for democracy. It's not exactly what our friends meant by that, but it is in the sense that these sort of temporary communities are experimenting with all kinds of ways of making decisions that the rest of us then get drawn into because of social media.
So I'm really interested in this,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the topic of has been the topic of the courses I've taught in Poland, and I've written about it, particularly started writing about it in Politics of Small
Right.
Things, and continue to write about it in things we've been publishing.
Right.
But I'm also worried about the limits of that. So you know, one thing that's striking about the examples you gave is that they all appeared and they also all
Right.
disappeared.
Right.
So is that something that you're going to consider in the class?
I think so, and I think it's interesting when these things disappear, what gets salvaged. You know, what are the pieces that then move on to the next thing, or that get worked into our democratic culture? For example, the Occupy Wall Street mic check. That is an aspect of practically every demonstration now. And of course, in the United States, it's very practical because you actually have to get licenses and permits to set up sound systems. And if you don't have a sound system, you don't have to deal with the police at all. But it's also interesting because it empowers people to have spontaneous demonstrations that then draw on what Charles Tilley used to call a repertoire that is well known to everybody, that has been articulated through social media. I think one of the things that certainly in our public seminar discussions I've become interested in is what spaces are no longer spaces for discussion. We've talked about how comments on blogs have almost disappeared.
Right.
Now that's actually not true. If you go to the New York Times or the Washington Post, you'll see hundreds and hundreds of comments. People are still writing in there, even though nobody reads those comments. But they don't read them on blogs. And you know, we're trying to figure out at Public Seminar, where has the conversation gone? Has it gone to Twitter? Has it gone to Facebook? And then I think we have to think about, going back to the companies, does the fact that the companies actually change what we see, what we speak about, how does that affect how the conversation is shaped?
So your, you know, my weekly contribution to public seminar it goes under the name of Gray Friday,
Right.
and having to do with a sensibility that I have, but that was named in an article, a speech that Adam Meekney gave.
Right.
Yours is Purple Wednesday,
Right.
so, and you know, which I think is actually relevant to this topic.
Yeah.
You know, because you are concerned about the bubbles,
Right.
and about how people who have different political positions are not paying attention to each other. I wonder if you're going to be exploring that.
Absolutely. I think one of the texts I want to bring to the table this summer is Eli Parizer's work. Parizer is a political consultant and one of the first social media pioneers in politics. And he's the person that developed the term the filter bubble. And the filter bubble, in fact, has been cultivated in many ways by politicians to consolidate a presence and often make it seem stronger than it is and more decisive than it is. And sort of coming back to your whole question of the gray and my purple, I think my project right now is to think about how do we take what is, how social media works, and hack into it and get past these filter bubbles. And that often includes teaching people to speak differently. We had this experience on Public Seminar last week where I did a post about International Women's Day and the women's strike. And I had one line where I suggested that perhaps women, conservative and liberal women, could agree that we probably shouldn't shut down speakers on campus that we didn't like. And there was a lot of pushback to that. And that seemed to me a lot simpler than, say, abortion,
Right.
but apparently not. And the reaction to that was very, very strong. Also, some radical and liberal women saying, you know, conservative women can take care of themselves if they want to be conservative.
Right. That was actually a response to my response.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things we really have to get past is not just the ways that we're separated by social media, but our comfort with that,
Right.
of only talking to the people who will reflect our own ideas back at us.
Yeah, it strikes me that at the present time, I was just talking to a student in my class on media and micropolitics, that on the one hand, we want to understand the new regime and how the social media are being developed in such a way that they constitute this new regime, and with all its ugliness.
Yeah.
But then, on the other hand, we have to consider how do we oppose that?
Right.
And that means actually getting together with people with whom you have some common principles, but also with whom you disagree.
Right.
And thinking about the United States, I was thinking, well, how do you get Bernie and Hillary supporters to work together?
Right.
But then, in terms of Purple Wednesday, how do you get even committed conservative Democrats to work with Bernie and Hillary supporters together to talk together and not to agree on everything, but to agree on some things to be able to act together. If indeed the Republic, the Constitution of the Republic really is torn asunder, as it is happening. One of the as is happening in other parts of the world. One of the very exciting things about the program in Wrocław is when you think about these different things happening around the world. The people in the seminar are from these different places. Some of which are very well known, and some of which are not all that well known. So.
Well, and that's actually one of the reasons I think it's important. I mean, I've always loved travel, and I've always loved going places with something to do, and a way to engage people on their own terms. And one of the things that I think is really important for Americans who are interested in social media is Americans tend to think that social media is just an American thing, even though intellectually they know that's not true. Because of the way it's structured, most of their contacts are American. You would really have to deal with language if you were connected to a lot of people in other countries. Americans don't speak so many languages well. And to me, social media is inherently a global phenomenon. Even if you take into account the fact that it's blocked in some countries, that it's filtered in other countries, that there is censorship in many places, including in the United States, it is nevertheless a very global phenomenon. So to teach and learn about social media in a setting like the Institute, I think is going to be incredibly exciting.